This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Anarchast. I'm Jeff Berwick, and today we have from SoCal, California, Foster and Kimberly Gamble. And interesting story, a few months ago everyone told me I had to see this new movie, Thrive, and I checked it out on the internet and I thought it was excellent. It's excellent for a number of reasons, but one of them is how it tied so many disparate topics together. And so I've been tracking them both down for a number of months. Now we finally found a time to talk. So I'm very happy to have you both on the show today. Welcome to Anarchast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. And just for people who haven't seen the Thrive, perhaps you could give us a little bit of an overview of what it's all about.
Go for it, Foster.
Well, I'd be happy to jump into that. It's a dot connector. We've spent a long time doing research in various areas and trying to figure out what's in the way of human beings thriving. And we were committed to not making the film until the solutions that we found were even more coherent than the problems that we discovered. And we finally got there, and in the process of it, realized that the story that we needed to tell had a lot of different parts to it, and we actually needed to connect all those parts in order to have the individual parts make sense in the larger whole. So the movie's called Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take? And it's really an exploration of what's in the way of our thriving and what are the solutions that we can actually enact that can move us toward a world where everybody has the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah, it's an excellent overview of a number of different topics. Many of the topics I'm quite familiar with in my life as the dollar vigilante. I'm a freedom fighter against central banks and governments, and you talked a lot about that. It's mostly in the middle part of the movie. But you started off talking about some energy stuff that I had not really heard a lot about before. So this was all sort of new to me. Could you tell us a little bit about what you see as going on with energy, and you foresee some sort of movement happening there to basically help out humanity?
I would be happy to. One of the core elements in my quest was the realization, I'm not the first to discover it by any means, but the realization in my life of a fundamental energy pattern in the universe. It turns out that at least at every scale that we've been able to track so far, there is one pattern called the torus, T-O-R-U-S, and it's a donut-shaped whirlpool vortex. And it turns out that that's what nature does. It's really the only pattern that sustains itself in a continuous medium. So if you look at an electron or an atom or the electromagnetic field around a human body or a cell or a solar system or a galaxy, really they're all different scales of this same pattern. And so it's a really huge insight because it can be a blueprint for creating our own sustainable systems. But specifically in answer to your question, it turns out that there are inventors who, once they became aware of the fundamental nature of how energy moves, they created technologies which mimic this movement and then are tunable like a guitar. And at certain resonant frequencies, these devices will just start pouring out electricity, clean and safe, right out of the space around us. So yes, I envision a huge world revolution very soon in terms of the democratization of energy, where people can have access to this type of energy anywhere on the planet, not dependent on the grid. And that's the great news. You know, Kimberly and I have had the privilege of visiting some of these labs and seeing the technologies, and it just moves you to tears to realize that we don't have to be polluting our skies or causing asthma or fighting over other people's oil and all this kind of stuff. The technology is already here. The unfortunate side of it is that virtually every lab that we visited has been raided and shut down, and the equipment taken, and the inventors gag ordered or threatened or worse. So there are very large vested interests, financial interests and power interests, who don't want to see this technology come out because it would cost them profits and cost them control over people's lives.
Well, I think the good news there is, thanks to the internet, there's no way they're going to be able to stop us at this point, and that's horrible what they've done to these inventors, but we'll get it out there one way or another if it exists, and that's great news that you've seen it actually exist. So one of the things about the movie that really caught my attention was that it's one of the theories that you based your philosophy on is basically non-aggression principle, which is basically what anarchy is based on, the non-aggression principle. You phrased it slightly differently, but that was basically the gist of it. Have you, or both of you, Kimberly, have you been basically freedom lovers, anarchists, voluntarists your whole life, or did you come upon this after a certain period of time, or did someone put you down this path at some point?
I would say I definitely have not been this way my whole life, although my instincts were voluntarist. I created the only voluntary program for homeless teens in the country back in the 90s when we had kids coming in off the streets voluntarily instead of through the system. But I wasn't aware of what I was doing. I just understood that when people participate voluntarily, it means that they want to be there, and therefore you can make something happen that you can't do when you're working with people against their will. So I think I had instincts along those lines, but it actually was in the course of uncovering what are the solutions to the predicament that we're in. I was active in, following the money and understanding the whole central banking system. And so it was when we were then saying, okay, so what is really a solution to this, not talking about tweaking just this fundamentally corrupt system, but an entirely new way of thinking. And Foster got into it first. And it was actually challenging for me initially because I feel like compassion is so often measured by sort of our belief in the programs that we provide for people in need. And so it really cut into it because the voluntarist notion, while it made sense to me, I didn't know how to get from where we are to there. And so it was difficult for me to really wrap around it and study it and then work backwards from there into, okay, so given that I now absolutely understand and agree that we've been completely duped, and that I believe that where we're going and where we absolutely need to go is to voluntary organization. At the same time, I think that there's a huge gap between where we are and that vision. And so it's the stages that helped me really wrap around it and integrate it to say, okay, starting right now with, to introduce a kind of deprogramming for people who don't know they're programmed, as Larkin Rose says. How do we begin that with integrating, honoring where people are at, and that not all people are willing or able to go kind of first and head on into this. Like some of us have, risked our lives or spent time in prison, as Larkin has, and your life has been completely unusual. And so some of us, taking a lead in this are in one position, and how do we work with everybody to move it further along? So as soon as I wrapped around the stages that we get into in Thrive and on our website, thrivemovement.com, that was when I could really completely embody it. And now, so I'm there, and what intrigues me most is how to communicate this in a way that people feel like there's a place for them to engage voluntarily in the inquiry.
Well, you're doing an excellent job of communicating all that through the Thrive movie, and but you mentioned Foster actually got into this stuff first. Were you born a libertarian, Foster, or did you have to learn it?
Well, I'm happy to tell you a little intergenerational wonder story here. I was really introduced to this by my son, who's now 32, and he sat me down one time and he said, "Dad, there's some stuff I think we really need to talk about," because he knew that I was really interested in practical solutions, and I was exposing a lot of the problems. He says, "I think you're missing a key piece here." And he began to introduce me to the whole voluntarist approach. And, I had the usual what ifs and but what about this and that, and he stuck with me, and we just spent literally, night after night, over a period of weeks and months, just hashing this stuff out. And I had that uncomfortable feeling that, each of us goes through at some point of realizing that I was on shaky ground morally, and what he was arguing was making a lot more sense than what I was trying to cling to. And so I began really kind of letting go into this and just asking him to teach me and recommend sources that I could read and sort this through for myself. And finally, I began to feel so relieved that in the same way that when I found Aikido, I was a martial artist for many years, and it wasn't until I found Aikido that I felt my soul had come home. I could commit all my spirit 100% because it was about protecting life, but it wasn't about having to injure other people. And then when I found free energy, it was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. We can actually access abundant, clean energy as long as we don't violate the source of energy. And on the social level, at the human level, what I finally came to realize is that the fundamental torus is not a group. That's an interesting and useful concept, but it's not real in the way that an individual is real when it comes to violation. And I finally got that, oh, the torus at the human level is the individual, and we need to start with honoring that and not violate that in building any of our systems. And frankly, to put it bluntly, I think unless we master that as a species, and soon, we won't actually survive as a species. And if we do master that, then I think we can turn the corner pretty quickly and actually end up thriving. So I really owe a huge debt of gratitude to the courage of my son his name is Trevor, and I will proudly plug his book. He's spent 6 years researching and writing a book on this that he's just published. It's called The Secrets to Nonviolent Prosperity. The subtitle is The Principles of Liberty. That is a really good user-friendly introduction, particularly for those people who are new to this. I highly recommend you check it out on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. It sounds excellent, and that's one of the most interesting stories I've heard about people coming to voluntarism or anarchism. So that's very interesting. Now, going back to the movie, you come up with a number of basic solutions or how we can start to move towards liberty, and you just explained that really at the heart of this philosophy is voluntarism or non-aggression. And perhaps Kimberly or Foster, or either both of you can sort of explain how you can see us moving to the next level with these things.
Kimberly, why don't you describe the stages of transition? I love the way you do that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because my skill, like I'm the producer of Thrive, and I think that my skill is being able to see a big picture and then work backwards and figure out what are the steps that need to be taken to get to that ultimate goal. And so for us, it was to say, okay, if complete voluntary association is where we're headed, based on the non-aggression principle, and here we are in pretty much the exact opposite state, what are the stages that are going to be needed? And when we sort of broke it into 3 basic stages, and with the recognition that honoring where we're going, it's like setting the course so that we know, for example, not to do anything now that's going to make it harder to get there ultimately. So no new taxes, obviously, to achieve anything that needs to happen between here and there, and instead, you know, dismantling the Federal Reserve and ideally bringing in these new energy technologies, the amount of money that would free up to put people in a position to be able to make voluntary choices about how they want to be running their lives and participating in education and whatever else that now the government's providing. So the stage 1 is sort of taking the military budget, cutting that in half, getting money out of the corrupt financial system so that without income tax people have that kind of money. And then, so it's sort of, in some ways, it's the best of what the progressive mentality has to offer, in that it acknowledges that there are people in serious need who are currently dependent upon the government, and to wipe that out without providing them the means from which to participate voluntarily, that's not going to do it. But we don't want to create anything new that's going to get in the way of where we're headed. So stage 1 is sort of freeing up money to create more prosperity so that people can even begin to see that the power that they have, that they're already paying that money, but as you know, most people don't relate to the fact that they're paying for all of these services. It's just sort of part of the backdrop of how they're living. So stage 2 then sort of takes the best of a traditional conservative worldview, I would say, which is it then shrinks government to really just defending individual rights, no wars of aggression, and has people participating increasingly in their own voluntary associations. And these aren't like, stage 1 ends and stage 2 begins. These are overlapping stages, all the while having as many voluntary associations as possible. And as stage 2 is underway and winds down, it moves toward no government, no involuntary government. People can organize however they choose to, of course. But it's then done with the prosperity that makes these choices possible. Because in my experience, where people's resistance comes in is they really can't conceive of having the resources that they need to participate voluntarily in the things that they now see that they have access to. So those are the 3 stages that we've kind of broken it into. Foster, if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, and then as we're going along in these stages, we, on the website, thrivemovement.com, we lay out some sort of grand strategies like closing down the Federal Reserve, getting out of international taxes, not participating in the IMF, the World Bank, things like that. But then there are also lots of actions that people can take as individuals on a daily basis that don't take a lot of time or money. And we recommend a top 10 that people start with. And literally, we suggest you print it out, tack it to your refrigerator, and just start checking off the list of any ones that you believe in. First of all, just starting with getting informed and speaking up and having the conversations with other people. And then moving your money out of the large tapeworm banks and into local banks and credit unions, at least until we get a system, a true free market of banking, at least to keep the money as much as you can in your local community, begins to support locally a decentralized power structure instead of having your money be in New York or London overnight and draining your community. And then things like supporting GMO-free farming and supporting the bringing out this free energy, supporting campaign finance reform and paper ballots, as long in stage 1, to whatever degree people choose to still participate in a political system. And if you find any candidates that you feel have some sort of integrity, at least we could have an honest voting system while we're in transition. And then ultimately we have a strategy that we call critical mass action, where people can sign up for anti-GMO movements or free energy movements and so forth, and they can sort of pledge their time or their money that they would then deliver when enough critical mass has been gathered. Like when 500,000 people sign up to show up somewhere, then we know that we're going to have the people, we're going to have the money, we're going to have the media coverage to really make an impact. So instead of a few people doing a protest here and there and it kind of goes by the boards, we gather the energy and then move when it's a large enough representation that it's really going to be highly leveraged in the world. So I recommend that people go to thrivemovement.com, go to the solutions section, and look at the strategies that are there. Find which sector you're most passionate about and where your talents lie, and especially to investigate our liberty section, where we go into a lot of these basic principles and offer a lot of the types of resources that your community will be more familiar than most with that. But it's one of the areas of most interest right now is people who have no idea about the liberty movement. Because they're really loving Thrive and it resonates with them, they're beginning to find out about people like Stefan Molyneux and your program, Jeff. I've been a follower of your writings for quite a while, and Hans Hoppe and Lou Rockwell, people like this who are really pioneering for our generation the principles and the strategies that can actually take us into a voluntary world where people are free to thrive.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent things that people can do. And here at the Dollar Vigilante, or what I do at the Dollar Vigilante, the name came about when I basically said to fight this central banking fiat currency system, one of the best ways is just to take your dollars and sell them for hard assets like gold or silver or other things. Basically just get rid of your dollars. And that's another way that people can make a contribution to end this totally artificial scam of a system that we live in today. But we're actually running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you really briefly, how has the response been? I know you launched the movie around, was it January or December?
November 11th.
Oh, it was November. Okay, I was a little late to the party. And so how has the response been so far?
Well, it's really been fantastic. I think it's over 2 million people have seen Thrive, and it's spreading around the world. And that was mostly pirated, but nonetheless, it was representative of the fact that people are really hungry for this. And we have found that they're so open, more open than I had anticipated, actually, to many of the ideas and what's going on, because we started making Thrive 8 years ago. And when we were talking about shutting down the Federal Reserve then, it seemed like, oh boy, this is going to be really radical for people. And now, with the Occupy movement and all the work that you and others have been doing, it's really ripe in the global atmosphere. So it's been a tremendously positive response. And, we're really encouraging people to Thrive. Our movie is really sort of the minimum sufficient coherence that we felt is needed to have a different lens from which to see what's really going on and what's possible. And thrivemovement.com just goes in depth into everything that we get into in the movie, and provides a resource tree so that you can do whatever research that you want to be doing from there. And it includes some big cues that we call them, the questions that really humanity hasn't figured out. And one of them that relates to liberty that intrigues me has to do with rightfully gained property, and our whole relationship to indigenous people throughout the world and throughout this country, and how to address remedying some of the initial wrongs of how our country was founded. In the course of dismantling countries, there's still this notion of ownership and private property. So we've identified some things that we hope to gather people from around the world, cross-culturally, to actually do some inquiry in some think tanks and figure out how we can move forward to create this world that we envision.
I'd add a couple of things to the response, which are very exciting. First of all, we've encouraged people to go ahead and create their own screenings. And there have been over 3,000 self-created screenings already, either in homes or people rent large venues up to 1,000, 1,500 people in their communities, and then invite people in to see Thrive. And out of this movement, what's been happening already is that people are seeing oftentimes the movie 1, 2, 3 times because it's very rich with information. But then they're gathering together in their local communities and forming Thrive groups, particularly by sector, as I mentioned before, and really starting to take on the major critical issues in their local communities, but also then linking to other communities who are doing the same thing across the country and around the world. And we thought we were going to have to spend 6 months to a year just arguing about the basic kind of information in the film, and it's not that way at all. As you said, through the internet, people are getting informed so rapidly that basically we're just getting calls from groups all over the world saying, come join us for an in-depth discussion about how we can organize effectively around solutions. So that's primarily what we're doing now, is starting to travel around the world and help cohere these groups that are taking these things on. So I would say that the single biggest interest is solutions in general. The next one is, how do we bring this free energy in? And the next one is, what's the deal on this liberty thing? Because I thought democracy was the end of the road, but it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm sure that we will be contacting you, Jeff, and other leaders in the liberty movement, because we're helping to cross-pollinate lots of different markets, different political wings, different interest groups, and so forth, because this liberty conversation, as you're probably noticing, is beginning to surface everywhere, because the other collectivist systems haven't worked, and it's not just an academic idea anymore. It's creating suffering in billions of lives and risking life as we know it on the planet. So this is the conversation which I think is the major one for the planet over the next 10, 20, 50 years. So I really appreciate what I know will be our alliance as this whole solutions movement goes forward.
I agree completely. This is incredibly important for the human race to figure this stuff out in the next few years. We're reaching the end of this horrible experiment in statism, and we have so much potential to free ourselves and to thrive. And so if people want to download the movie, where should they go?
ThriveMovement.com. You can rent the movie there or play it forward from there through your social network, or you can buy a DVD also from ThriveMovement.com.
And I believe it's just $5 to rent it, is that right?
That's right, $5 to rent it and $4 to share it forward.
That's a much better way than watching Monday Night Football or something else. I highly recommend it to anyone, and it's great to pass around because it does touch on so many topics, and it's really a very interesting and introspective type of a movie. And so I thank you both very much for being on, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime in the future. And I wish you the best of luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you
a lot,
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all for now. That's Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.